Alright guys, it's been a while. Midterms just finished. So, I'm going to semi-wing this video because it's like 12 a.m. and I have a 9 a.m. obligation tomorrow. I am apparently a speaker for some church meet or whatever. So, here's a follow-up video. Not really a follow-up video, but now that I have verbalized my thoughts regarding the UPCAT and UP, okay, my still skips a beat. To some extent, I still feel anxious whenever I say those words, so that's something to take note when in regards to how I feel about that. And I guess I have notes here. So based on my previous two videos, I actually had no idea where I was going or like what I was trying to go for, like the point basically, because I know it's a common theme among my videos wherein there's really no parting message, there's really no lesson advice. I just literally yap because I have no one to yap to at this point. I do, but it's not the same. I don't know. Videos, I'm yapping to my future self. Okay, so anyways, to wrap things up as quick as possible, I basically had the phase wherein in order to compensate for my lack of confidence, not really lack of self-confidence, but I really had a phase where self-deprecation was a daily habit. I was able to break free out of that at some point. I don't know how specifically. I might make a video on that. But things were pretty rough. Not necessarily the dark times. It was more towards the end of the dark times. It was basically my recovery phase or era. But yeah, there were some things to be worried about and there were issues to deal with, such as the parent thing, which I'm pretty sure I haven't mentioned in this channel. Yep, I had parent marriage issues, which was definitely troubling, in which it will be actually related to the point here. Basically, things were rough, the world was absurd, reality was pretty cruel. So, as a typical teenager who has trouble grasping and grappling his situation and how unfair everything is in life, what would be the most logical step to do? Not even logical, what would be the most natural thing to do? Yeah, you got it, delusions. So, I had to make up as many convenient narratives about the world, myself, what I do, in order to function properly. I can say to some extent that I really had no reason to live, and I'm not saying that with the intention to sound edgy and try to win your pity or whatever. It's just that there was no point in waking up the next morning, or at least that's what it felt like. And I'm pretty sure it couldn't be more wrong than that. Of course, it was a phase, alright? So basically, inflated sense of ego through delusion. So how does this relate to the UP thing? Here's how the actual conversation went, because in the first video, it was pretty all over the place. College was coming, I had to get my shit together, of course. I was initially planning for Japan. Not initially planning, but more of hopefully planning that, okay, if I could make this work, I'll make it work. But I apparently didn't want it enough, because in the process of trying to actually grab the necessary documents and the requirements to actually push through with this, get out of the country as soon as I enter college, apparently I didn't want it enough. It's just not practical at that point in my life. Of course, there were ways, if we really want something, we do anything to get it if we really do want it. But I guess that just speaks enough of, okay, Japan will just, we'll put that aside. So, like I said, we'll go through over the options again. LaSalle, De La Salle, Ateneo, Mapua. As you can see, UP was in the list. De La Salle, because Don Bosco friends, my junior high school friends are there. Ateneo, because it's Ateneo. Mapua, it's actually one of the best in computer science. And the same applies for De La Salle. The friends could just be considered bonus at this point, but yeah, friends are still, it's pretty ironic once we get to the actual point. So, browse through colleges. What are my options? My mama. Mama was like, hey, how about UP? UPCAT. You know, people are talking about that. Diba, Homer? Diba? Right, son? How about UP? And this is a pretty rough narration. I don't need it. Yeah, that was basically more or less my response. And looking back at it now, it's just, and I'm not gonna cover potential in this video. I'm just gonna elaborate on why I felt and still do feel guilty as to that. Like, no, UP, okay? And here are the reasons why. Number one, the Borgois issue, and I'm just gonna say Borgis because that's what the slang term is now. And to clarify, this is something that I figured out on my own. This is my original, not really original, but this is something that I have come to recognize on my own. I didn't know this was an actual issue that has been circulating around University of the Philippines people. Apparently, not really apparently, but it just makes sense that, of course, the non-privileged people will call out the privileged people who were able to get into UP, because of course privileged people have privileges, and why don't they use it? And to some extent, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here, and hypocrisy and all that, but I do agree with that. I believe that privilege is not just a privilege, it's also a responsibility, and it's a responsibility to do better in a way. I know it sounds wrong because, of course, when you're privileged, you have access to all these learning materials, you have more free time, you can study better, you have a better room, you have maids to cook your food. When, of course, for the less fortunate people who actually have to work their asses off every day more than your average person, because, well, life, this is how society works. We don't really get to choose our circumstances in which we were born in, but of course, when you have the means to perform better, then you are expected to perform better than people who are less fortunate because of things that are out of their control. But that's not really their fault. I'm not trying to point blame, I'm just trying to explain why I believe that. Okay? I'll elaborate on this on a future video, but for now, let's put this aside. Borgis issue, I thought that it just felt unfair for the people, for someone like me who was fortunate enough to have all this, like have that phone, aqua flask, man, I just felt like that I would feel guilty once, or in the scenario that I do pass UPCAT and end up there. I just think I'll feel bad. It's just my nature. Second, when I say UP, or when anyone else says UP, most people always think about UP Diliman, which is the main, which is of course in Manila. And in that time, I just moved into Negros Occidental, a province, and logically it just made sense to not go back. Here's why: because of course you just settled there, okay? I just finished adjusting, and now you're telling me we're gonna go back to Manila anyway. And second of all, I have no relatives there. I do, but not close enough to Quezon City, which is where Diliman is. So, of course, it would be pretty inconvenient. And of course, Manila is Manila. It's dangerous. I don't want to get my kidneys sold to the Chinese or something. But, like, the point is there. It's going to be difficult if I go back. So, there would be no reason to leave again when I settled in this peaceful place, when I finally made friends and learned the dialect. It just doesn't make sense. Third, I had this I'll be fine mindset. I don't need UP. I don't need to prove anything. I mean, if you think about it, or try to put yourselves into my shoes, which is pretty difficult to do, I know, but try. How does me taking and potentially passing UPCAT prove anything to anybody? But I'm smart. Oh, I passed one of the most difficult exams in the world. But even though I did say that I had a lack of self-confidence, that's not really the right term to use here. I just can't find the right word. I self-deprecate, but of course I had this compensation with delusions and, let's just say, inflated sense of ego in a good manner. It was pretty regulated, but there was delusion. I did not need UP to succeed in life. That was the phrase that kept resonating in my mind when anytime my parents would ask me about UP. And of course I gave myself allowance. I thought that at the time I was grade 11, if I do ever decide to change my mind and feel left out because everybody else around me is taking UPCAT at some point, I thought, oh, maybe I'll just prepare grade 11. Well, guess what? UPCAT is given to grade 11 students, and I did not realize that after UPCAT was finished. And the stupid thing is, my classmates were preparing for it at the time, and you know what I told myself? I thought they were just over preparers, that they were preparing literally a year in advance, when in fact they were preparing for the UPCAT that's upcoming in like 3 months or so. Stupid. So aside from that, I'll be fine without UP mindset in a more logical and grounded perspective, especially in my chosen program, which is computer science. A degree doesn't really hold much value when you're applying to a job, when you're applying for any company. It's your portfolio that matters. So I thought, whether it be USLS, University of St. LaSalle, you know, the bootleg LaSalle, which I still love, by the way, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I can actually produce work on my own personal projects. And I thought that going to UP would stress me so much, I wouldn't be able to focus on my personal projects, and it's just not my priority. Because academics, which is actually the next point, academics doesn't really matter in much in life. Okay, like I've changed that mindset. Back in elementary and junior high school, I was really, I can't stress it enough, addicted into being an academic weapon when I'm clearly not one. Well, I can be one. I know that. I know my self-worth now in the area of academics. And I don't prioritize academics as much as I did back then when I was junior high school, and it started to reflect here in senior high school, in a sense that my pops, my old man, really stressed that college doesn't really, or at least the college you graduated from, doesn't really matter if you have the soft skills necessary to live out life. Like what? The ability to convince people, the ability to connect with people and talk with people. Basically, discarte. I don't know what the word is in English. It's basically things that you don't really learn from a textbook. Things you just learn through experience. And yes, I can argue that the college you apply to and study in 4 years really shaped those experiences. So it does matter, but I get this point. It's not about the academics. It's not about the GPA and GWA. Okay, the guy has a very solid backstory to back it up. Okay, he came from a very unfortunate family, so separate story. We're gonna cut this